Hi everyone, Nick from Better Tell It here. What you're about to listen to is the first chapter from the adventures of Nik Calhoon. This is an original story written by me, which I hope to expand in many more chapters. Now, enjoy the story. It was a beautiful morning in Boulder, Colorado. Nik Calhoon woke up and admired the rising sun. He stayed in bed for a few more minutes, stretching and yawning. After his bathroom routine, he dressed up and took his phone off the charger. There was an email notification. While going to the kitchen, he read through the email. It was from a woman called Nancy, who was in her late 60s and recently widowed. She wrote about something terrorizing the farm that she was trying to manage. She has been finding animals around the farm mutilated and almost completely eaten. This has been accompanied by loud and blood-curdling howls that were becoming more frequent, and disturbingly, they were turning into growls that could be heard closer and closer to the house throughout the last few months. She had no idea what this could be and if there was more than one, but she shared that it sounds like a wolf, and she has had a glimpse one time. She saw a shape behind the barn, resembling a wolf standing on two legs. It had a long snout and a big bushy tail, from what she could see. Our hero thought for a bit and decided that this was probably a dogman. And dogmen, more often than not, are in packs. This is going to be hard, he thought to himself, but nevertheless decided to head out and try to help this nice old lady. He entered the kitchen, said good morning and kissed his wife, then poured himself a cup of coffee while explaining that he will have to go on a job. After his coffee, he prepared his modified Toyota Land Cruiser 80 series. The car had the newer 4.2 turbo diesel straight 6 engine with bigger intercooler, turbo, and injectors, all of that set with additional boost. Also, Nick had added a nice lift kit with bigger beaded run-flat tires, reinforced suspension, and chassis. This has been one of his passion projects, and he loved this car. In it, he had everything he might need to live, track, cameras with live feed and GPS, drones with thermal cameras, and everything else needed to hunt. He double-checked everything in the car and made sure the weapons and computers were secured. Nick had a background in IT and management. He was self-taught in tracking, gun handling, and physical training. The rising hunter was aware that the physical training was always the one thing lagging behind. He had this feeling in the back of his mind that this will cause him huge trouble if not taken seriously. On top of that, one of his eyes had some issues, blurry images from time to time on different distances, but he tried not to worry too much about it. He had his scopes. Nick was a married man. He had a beautiful wife and two smart and independent boys that were 4 years apart, currently around 10 and 6. The day he decided that he wanted to help people, he knew he had to leave his current job. Because of that, he spoke to his wife and set up a few online shops that she would manage. With him quitting his daily job, they still needed an income. Even if he did not make it back from a job, the online shops should be a constant cash flow if everything was managed properly. He leveraged the Amazon storage facilities to reduce the overhead and management required. His wife was worried about him, but she knew he needed this, and she also wanted to help people, so she understood him. After everything was accounted for in the car, Nick said his goodbyes kissed his wife and kids, and the 4.2 turbo diesel roared to life, ready for action. During the long drive to Maine, he thought of his family a lot, how much he loved them and how much he wanted to see them again. To make sure of this, he knew he had to be prepared. So he started going over the things in his head again. What he knows, what he needed to know, what he needed to have, and what he could do to make sure he ended on top. The road took him through Kansas. He was originally from Lawrence, and he started reminiscing of his childhood. He recalled all those fond memories of the time spent with his parents and his sister. They were still alive and well, thank God, but he visited them less often than before. He promised himself to swing by on his way back. The road stretched long, straight, sometimes twisty, and the trees alongside it passed one by one, like counting seconds, minutes, hours, and days even. After many miles, sleep by the side of the road and gas station food, Nik finally arrived at the farm and was greeted by the old lady. She thanked him for coming and informed him of the last events that took place. She said that it seemed the creature has gotten bolder after her husband passed away. Her husband has been a stout man, standing tall, not running from hard work, and went hunting often. His name had been John. Maybe what was lurking around the farm knew all of this, and maybe her husband knew something about it as well. But one thing was certain, he had kept it at bay just by being there. After hearing this, Nik asked if he can check out her late husband's office. Nancy agreed and showed him the room. He entered and just stood in the middle of the room for a few minutes, tried to figure out what type of a man John had been. He saw the way the furniture was set and the way the desk was arranged. Nancy couldn't bring herself to move anything after his passing. Nik went around the desk and sat on the chair, checked the notebooks and papers, the drawers as well, but found nothing of interest on the case. Then he turned the chair to one side and he heard a strange squeak under his right foot. He moved the chair and kneeled down. Then he saw it, a hidden compartment under a pre-cut board in the wooden floor. After removing the board, what he found was something resembling a diary of John's encounters in the woods. He had observed the creatures while they hunted. This has happened while he himself had been on his own hunt. The ferocity and cunningness of their attacks had startled him. He considered himself lucky for getting out of there. Also, he had changed his hunting spots after that encounter. So this means I'm dealing with more than one of these creatures, the hunter muttered out loud. Nik sighed, understanding that this was going to be a tough one. Without losing more time, he started putting out cameras around the farm while contemplating a plan of action. Nancy approached him while he was mounting one of the cameras and offered him a room in the house to stay in. He gladly accepted it, as he was about to ask her for the same thing. All cameras were now in place and Nik decided to check on his boomsticks, as he called them sometimes. He lifted the trunk door and there it was, the scoped Savage 110 Hunter, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, that he used for long-range work. This might have not been the best rifle, but for sure was one of those with the best names out there. The scope was a 4:16 magnification Vortex Viper. With it, he could do short and long-range work. He debated if the silencer was required. If only one creature showed up, the job would be done with 1 or 2 shots and it would not matter where the shot came from. However, if there were more than one, then maybe it would make a difference, but with the price of a reduced range. For some reason he had forgotten to bring the silencer anyway. Shame he planned so much. It remained to be seen if this would be an issue. The next thing he had brought with him was a shotgun. He wanted to take his lever-action 45-70 but decided that the slug buckshot slug pattern of the Benelli M4 with a grip handle would do him more good this time. For a sidearm he trusted a 10mm P320 X10 by Sig Sauer. He needed that ammo capacity and the gun was easy to modify with a red dot or a flashlight or both. Just as a precaution, if things got close enough, he had also brought an AR-15 chambered in .458 SOCOM, packed with armor-piercing bullets. He was sure that if the creatures came in too close, the shotgun and the pistol would slow them down, but probably won't kill them, except with a slug or bullet right to the eye, which was already hard enough task when a hulking mountain of muscle, claws and dagger-like teeth was trying to rip you apart. The AR had a 1:4 magnification scope, just in case, as well as a handle grip mount in front for more stability. As mentioned earlier, Nik loved his scopes. They helped him with the occasional blur in his right eye. After everything was accounted for, checked and brought inside the room, Nik decided to lay on the bed until the night fell. He was wondering if there was a way to make these creatures leave instead of fighting them one versus who knows how many. Night came and he had fallen asleep. The long drive has taken its toll. Howls tearing through the evening stillness woke him up. He shot out of bed and went to the window. His room was on the second floor, so he had a pretty good view of the surrounding area. The regular binoculars he had were able to show only what the moon shined upon. The tree line was about 500 yards away, and he was able to see some movement, shapes, jittering here and there, but he could not confirm what those were. Maybe 150 yards out, and to the right of his viewpoint was the big barn. Animals, feet, and the tractor was housed in there. He decided to remain on the window for the rest of the night and keep watch. He wondered if Nancy would let him set up in the attic so he is higher off the ground and hopefully have a better view. The night passed, and apart from the occasional howls, nothing else happened, thankfully. When the first rays of the sun came out, he decided that it would be best if he took a nap. He had work to do during the day and needed to rest prior to that. A few hours later, he got up and went down the stairs. There he saw Nancy setting up the table with the lunch she had already prepared. He greeted her and had some bacon and eggs with a big cup of coffee and another one with lemonade. The hunter told her about John's diary and what he had written down. He suggested that he wanted to protect her and keep her safe, thus he never told her. Sadly, he had passed away early, and now there was no one to keep her safe, to keep those creatures away. Nik finished his lunch, thanked Nancy, and went out to check the cameras. While walking to them, he had a quick call with his sweetheart to let her know he was okay, and was happy to find out they were doing good as well. He had placed one of the cameras on the back of the barn, on the side towards the tree line. Nik was really curious to see what he would find on it. Call it a hunch, but he suspected they used the barn to cover themselves while going out of the forest. They would have kept the barn between them and the house, and this way they were invisible for anyone looking from the house. He exchanged the SD card with a fresh one and took the full one inside. The laptop was in the back of the truck, so he picked it up. After inserting the card, he was shocked by what was on it. The creatures did indeed show up on that side of the tree line, but they were way more than he anticipated. There were 5. This meant that there could be more, but there were at least 5. This was turning to be damn scary. However, Nik composed himself. Instead of shivering, he smiled with excitement when he felt the cold running down his spine. He knew he could not give in to fear. There was a question though, why they did not try to advance to the barn last night. Maybe it was the car, maybe something felt different to them, so they decided to wait. Nik was now strongly considering any possible way to make them change hunting and living locations, to go deeper into the forest where there were no people. But how could he do that? The hunter researched old folklore and found that there were some rituals to convey with these creatures. But for one, he was not a shaman, and second, the creatures seemed to be a group that was already large enough to not be a part of a bigger pack with an alpha. Or maybe the alpha was with them. Maybe it was back in the shadows and he could not see it. In the end, he decided to wait and see what they would do in the following days, until he was able to devise a plan of action. This night, he had prepared up front and drank another big mug of coffee just in case. Nancy had given him permission to set up shop in the attic, and he did so. This night he had live feed on his laptop from the cameras, 2 on the barn, 1 facing the trees and 1 facing the house, and 2 on the house facing the trees and the barn. He also had his thermal camera drone prepared, but was reluctant to use, as they could hear it and become agitated. However, he decided that he had no choice and he had to know their numbers 100%. The bolt action was beside him, his gun on his hip, and the AR next to the attic door, the shotgun light on the bed downstairs. Night fell. The evening birds and other sounds came alive. The moon was shadowed by clouds from time to time, but it was still possible to scan with the binoculars, and there was also the live feed on the laptop. Midnight. The surroundings had been quiet for the last half an hour. A low chirp indicated movement on one of the cameras, the barn camera facing the tree line. There they were. Only 3 of them were visible this time. They moved to the end of the tree line, and each one of them hunched behind a different tree. The drone was then set up and flown into the sky, with Nik moving it as high as it would go. He moved it over them, but they were already shuffling and raising their heads. They had already heard it. The hunter had no choice and decided to take his chance by pointing the drone their way. The video recording was turned on, so he could review the footage later. Nik managed to get the drone on top of them before they fled. He tried to track them for some time in the forest, but the maximum range was reached and the drone had to turn back. He was not able to live count the bodies on the screen then, but later, when he reviewed the footage, his fears were confirmed. Before they started running, there were 3 bodies on the tree line, 3 bodies 15 or 20 yards deeper in the forest, and then another one around 50 yards behind these ones. That most likely meant there was an alpha. This was the alpha. He sighed, thinking that if it allowed them to hunt here after John had passed away, the alpha was not willing to move away. They had the opportunity they were waiting for. He stayed up to monitor during this night as well. He was relieved that they did not approach again. However, this was the second night in a row when they were near the barn and the house and they did not approach. This meant that for sure they did not get any of the animals from the barn, and if they counted on this as a food source, and if they had not eaten anything else in the forest, they would attack soon. as they were getting hungry. At sunrise, he went to his bed and again slept until noon. Nancy had made lunch, this time steak and mashed potatoes, and for a dessert, a lovely apple pie. Nik loved pie. He cleaned his plates while telling her of last night. He told her his concerns and she shared them as well. He proposed to go deep in the forest with a carcass of an animal. He had not decided what kind yet, and leave it there, to try this for a few days and see if this would make the thing stay away. Nancy agreed, as she was also aware that if an all-out war started, it might end badly for Nik, and for her. The hero had to hurry as he was losing daylight. He jumped in fury, his Toyota, and sped away to the nearby town's butcher shop. It was a smaller town, cozied up in its spot. Seemed like a nice place, but he knew what was lurking around. After some thinking in the shop, he bought 3 smaller pig carcasses, around 150 pounds each, had them wrapped good in nylon, and loaded them in the car. "Nice car, you don't see many of those," said the butcher while helping Nik with the loading. "Yeah, thanks. I have always dreamed of one, and it was hard to get and set up." The butcher smiled, nodded Nik goodbye, and went back inside the shop. Nik took off to a location that Nancy told him about. It was deep in the forest and hard to reach, but fury was made for this. It had already been 3 p.m. when the rocks started flying under the car's tires. The hunter knew he would be coming back by dark, but he had no choice. Another night might make them attack the barn, and that would force him to pull the trigger. He reached the location at about 7 p.m. There was not much time. The road had been hard, and only by sheer luck he did not have to use the winch on a few occasions. After swiftly getting out of the car, he quickly pulled out the pigs and got them out of the nylon. He stretched a bit and noticed how quiet the forest was. Maybe fury was too noisy, and that had driven the animals away. He knew better, but did not want to think of it. At around 7:45 p.m., he climbed into his 4x4 and started the way back. He hoped that it would take less time, as he was now going down on the most treacherous parts, and that usually, but not always, was easier than climbing. 2 hours had already passed, and the forest was already dipped in darkness. Nik was driving down the winding paths when suddenly he noticed up ahead a few shining balls of light. Those were eyes. He stopped the car and stared ahead. He rolled the window a bit and listened. He saw the eyes moving past him, even outside of the headlights' reach. They still glimmered. He heard loud howls around him, but they were moving away, moving towards the carcasses. Nik breathed heavy, tried to calm down his pummeling heart as he continued moving toward the house. He arrived at around 10 p.m. Nancy was outside the house, waiting for him at the door, as she had seen the headlights. "The road did not take less time on the way back, it seems," said Nik and chuckled. They got into the house and sat around the kitchen table. He could not eat as the encounter really shook him up, but he could not resist a piece of that heavenly pie. Nancy heard what he had to say, and she really hoped this would help. Nik wanted to do the same thing tomorrow as well, but he wanted to be in town early so he can get to the forest spot long before darkness. They did not say it out loud, but both of them were concerned that if he had attracted them there, they will be nearby once he gets there the second time. They might be waiting for him. He went to bed early, but had his laptop on beside him, in case the cameras detected something. He slept restlessly, dreamt of a dogman ripping at him and tearing him apart. Then he woke up, drenched in sweat. The sun was rising and there were no alarms. That was a relief. He took a shower and got down to the first floor. Nancy had already brewed a steaming pot of coffee. He had a cup and left at around 7:30 a.m. The town was some time away, but he made it there before the shop was open, and so he decided to check up on his family while he was waiting for the shop owner. His beloved answered the phone cheerfully. He also was happy to hear her voice, happier than usual. The previous day had taken its toll. They spoke for a bit until he saw the butcher coming around the corner. He had to hang up, so he told her how much he loved her. She replied with the same and asked him to be careful and not to take more risks than necessary. He laughed a bit and agreed. He greeted the shop owner and made the same order, 3 pigs wrapped in nylon. The butcher wanted to ask what those were for, but he was making a good buck out of the deal, so he chose to not ask any questions that might jeopardize the deal. Nik entered the tree line and moved toward the spot. He was more nervous than the yesterday's trip. He could not help himself but peer in every shadow and behind every bend. The trip was a bit easier this time, as he remembered the hardest parts and how to go over them. The last 30 minutes were the most nerve-wracking. He noticed some bent bushes and even a few claw marks, or what he thought were claw marks, on some of the trees. He reached the spot but felt happy and scared at the same time, because the pigs were totally picked clean. It looked like his plan had worked. The area smelled of rot, but it was not because of the bones. It was the rot of the creatures that had feasted at this place last night. The new delivery was made, and Nik wanted to leave the place as soon as possible. Fear was again pouring down the twisty roads and moving towards the house, but the hunter could not shake the feeling of being watched with unbelievable menace while he was doing the drop-off. Was that the alpha? Was he mad that he tricked them into leaving the place with warm, fresh food? Nik was not sure, but he hoped he was wrong, and he was just nervous. Back at the house, both agreed that Nik will stay for 1 more week, just in case. He needed to test if the plan had really worked. The cameras were still in place, and he even decided to move one of the house cameras to the other side of the barn, again facing the tree line. During the next couple of days, Nik made sure his weapons were clean, oiled, prepared. He also checked his ammo and made sure his so-called battle vest and belt were stocked with spare ammunition. After this, he ran a few laps around the house, did some push-ups and pull-ups on a pipe in the barn. Seeing all the work Nancy had to do for the animals made him help her as well. 4 days had already passed and there were no sightings. However, for some reason it started to feel more and more like a calm before the storm. And indeed, there was a storm. Huge clouds rolled in on the 5th day. It rained the whole day, lightning tearing the sky. The storm continued through the night. Nik was concerned that the cameras would be of no use in this weather, and because of that, during the day he wanted to move one of the cameras inside the barn, as he had seen the flaw of having only outside cameras and wanted to rectify this error. Because of this, he had gotten all soaked by the heavy rain. He could have used the car to get to the barn. "Good job, Nik," he said, half laughing after the job was done. The view from the barn was good, but due to the many animals in the barn and them moving around, he had to turn off the movement detected notifications. That meant he had to keep watch throughout the whole night. If the storm did not let up, as the outside cameras won't be able to detect anything. The storm did not let up. It continued with increased intensity. Nik and Nancy had a nice meal. The day before, Nancy had asked him to go to town and stock up on some supplies. She had prepared her famous brisket recipe that has been passed down to her by her mother, who in turn had inherited it from her mother, and so on and so forth. "This is amazing," Nik said. It was good. Too good even, because he ate more than he should have. Since the storm was still raging, he decided he would go into the attic again. He set up his laptop, and as he suspected the only camera that was of any use was the one in the barn. Nik calmed himself by thinking that everything has passed and it was just a stormy night and nothing more, nothing ominous. While staring at the screen, he had dozed off. He dreamt of home and of his family. He was back there and he was happy. And then a strange sound from the laptop interrupted him, a growl, and then animals blaring, each in its own way. He woke up and stared at the screen, but something was staring back. There was a huge black, wolf-like creature. It was at least 7.5 feet tall, with blood running down its maw, holding a ripped-up goat in his arm, and staring into the camera with unbelievable menace. It was covered in bloody gashes, like it had fought more than one of its kind. A blinding flash, loud crack, and then huge thunder shook the house. Nik instinctively looked through the window. He returned his gaze to the laptop quickly, but the creature was gone. Only the open door of the barn was visible. Nik quickly scrambled to his feet and made sure his vest was on, his sidearm was there. He swung the Benelli on his back and took the AR-15 SOCOM in his hands. He knew the thing was probably heading for the house, and in this weather, he could not do anything with the bolt action. He would need a thermal scope for the future, if he survived. Then he swiftly went to Nancy's room and told her to hide in the bathroom, lock it, and to not make a sound until he calls for her. She did as she was told, taking a few blankets to make her stay in the tub more comfortable. The hunter made his way downstairs quietly, but first stopped at the top of the stairs and glanced down, scanning the first floor and the windows he could see. There was no movement and he decided to start going down the stairs one by one, trying to not make a sound. But his heart was pounding like crazy. When he reached the third stair from the bottom, he heard a squeak from what sounded like someone stepping on the wooden floor. But it was not him. It was coming from the porch. Something was out there. It could be only one thing. Nik huddled next to the guardrail and pointed his rifle toward the front door and windows. Then he saw the creepy shadow, an elongated snout, hunched forward with long fingers ending in presumably claws. He gulped, soft, but in his head it sounded like a huge bell ringing. Nik expected to hear another one from the back door, but there was nothing. Was this the Alpha? Was it alone? How could that be? Then it dawned on him. Making the pack move to another location was equivalent to challenging the leader. Nik had not taken into an account that the things might turn out this way. The Alpha was back, and he was mad. He had slaughtered his pack. That's where the wounds were from. Now the Alpha was going to slaughter the one that challenged him. This was both good and bad for Nik. He was now facing only one dogman, but that one was full of rage. Aiming at its head, he clicked the safety off. Even through the rain, the creature heard it and jumped back immediately, now out of sight. This was it. It now knew Nik was on to him. The element of surprise was gone. The hunter was not sure what to do next. If he went outside, that would make him an easy target. If he stayed inside, this would bring a lot of devastation to the house, but would be safer for him. He decided to remain in the middle of the stairs. If it came from the second story, he could run up and protect Nancy. If it came from the first floor, he would have the higher ground. Nik had to lure it somehow. He thought of the drone. If he could get to it, he could make it go to the door, and if he had luck, the dogman would attack it and Nik could take the shot. However, the drone was in the attic, too far away, and might put Nancy in danger. It was not going to work. What was around him? He noticed a toy on a shelf next to the top of the stairs. It was one of those remotely operated cars that start to spin, flash, and emit loud noises. That was it. He hoped it had batteries though. Nik moved slowly and quietly to the top and checked the remote and the car. By some miracle they were full. He didn't know if the batteries were good, but he had to risk it and hope. He made his way towards the first floor, flicked the button on the car and put it down. Then he flicked the switch on the remote and the car started moving. Nik too came at the door, holding the rifle on the guardrail with one hand, and with the other he moved the car to the door. Once there, he breathed deeply and pushed the button that made it flash, roll and honk. He took the rifle in both hands, and in that very moment the door burst open, splinters everywhere, and in the middle of all this was the crazed monster in full view. Nik fired. Once, twice. The creature flinched. Blood started pouring out in thin streaks. Then it raised its head and bared its teeth. Nik switched to full auto and blasted the creature. It roared but was still coming at him. He ran up the stairs, threw down the AR and pulled up the Benelli. He could hear the groans of the creature, but also its footsteps up the stairs. They were creaking under its weight, like dead moans before breaking. Nik readied himself and waited. As soon as the dogman turned the corner after the stairs, it saw him and bolted like an enraged lightning. Our hero fired. Slug, buckshot, until the shotgun was empty. The creature staggered, but kept creeping towards him. Rage filled its eyes. It wanted to rip apart this puny human that dared to turn the pack against its alpha. Nik took out his trusty 10mm SIG, aimed at his right eye, said, "I'm sorry, you have to go," and fired. The hulking monstrosity stopped in place, made a gurgling sound, the air leaving its already damaged lungs. The SOCOM had done a number on them, and fell on its back. Nik had watched a lot of scary movies and knew what to do. He got a bit closer, but not too close, aimed at the left eye and squeezed the trigger. Double tap. Do not leave things to chances. He waited another 10 minutes, with now reloaded AR in hands, before going to Nancy. While he waited, he thought about how calm he was while the ordeal lasted. He was more nervous now than he was a few minutes ago. He smiled and shook his head in disbelief. Nancy was weeping a bit, but she was safe and she was happy to see Nik unharmed. They noticed the storm had calmed down. It was like this creature had brought and was fueling it with its rage. With the sun now smiling again, Nik had a hard time getting the thing out of the house. but he managed and the job was done. They buried it next to the tree line. He hoped this would serve as a message to any others and not as a challenge to them. After all was done, he called his astonishing wife and told her he was fine and the issue was solved. She was glad and felt relieved of the worry. Then she shot at him. "Do you still want to live in the woods, huh?" Nik laughingly replied, "I guess I will never learn. I still do," he answered, chuckling. They both laughed and he asked her to send his regards to their boys and told her he will be heading back in a few days. After that, he packed up his stuff, removed the cameras, helped Nancy put in a new door and clean up the mess. This took a good amount of time, and it was already time to leave. Nancy thanked him profusely and made him her famous brisket for a goodbye. She also prepared an envelope with the recipe so he can give it to his wife. That was a huge honor. He thanked her, hugged her, told her to call him anytime in case of need, and then got into fury and headed home. During the way back, he thought about everything that happened, what he could have done differently, and thanked God everything turned out the way it did. He was alive. He made a mental note, though, to prepare something to attract a creature, or at least distract them, so he can move. He was lucky this time, but for the next one, he had to be prepared. After many hours of driving, he was close to home, but also close to Lawrence. As he had promised himself, he stopped by to see his parents. Thankfully, they were doing good, enjoying their retirement. His dad again made a comment about Fury and how over the top it was and that all of this was not necessary. But Nik knew that it was. He laughed and said, "I know, Dad, but this is how I like it." The truth is, Nik loved his dad's '67 Chevy Impala 4-door. If they made that thing in a 4x4 variant, there would be no contest. The family spent some time together, did some catching up. He did not tell them of what he did in Maine. He planned to never tell them. They would be worried sick. After some time, they said their goodbyes and he headed home. His wife and kids were happy to see him. He was even happier. "It's nice to sleep in your own bed," Nik said while falling asleep almost immediately after that. In the morning, Nik opened his eyes to an email. The subject read, "Please help. I think Bigfoot took my son."